This final portion here is going to be a cybersecurity panel. We're going to be talking about moving towards a secure information society, how we can be prepared for the threats and survive the complicated cyberspace. Other talking points that we're going to be covering will be improving the security posture of your digital core, about building security into the application development lifecycle, and how we could also automate incident responses and other security workflows with threat intelligence. Now, there are a total of 5 gentlemen joining us on stage. We'll start off first by introducing them one by one. Our first speaker, or our first panelist coming up on stage is Stephen Sim, and he's been working for more than 24 years in the cybersecurity field with large end-user enterprises and critical infrastructures. He's also always keen to give back to the community and volunteers with the ISAC Singapore chapter as president. Already on stage, let's give Stephen a nice big round of applause. Great energy, guys. Next, we have Sudarsan Lakshmikumar, an entrepreneurial spirited pioneering technologist with over 15 years of experience in identifying and implementing enabling technologies and enterprise systems that facilitate business processes and strategic objectives. Once again, we have the Chief Technology Officer of KeepFlying, Sudarsan Lakshmikumar. Next up, we have Tom Manor. He is the Chief Technology Officer for SBI Digital Markets in Singapore, where he builds a regulated digital asset platform for institutional capital markets clients. Once again, a nice big hand for CTO SBI Digital's Tom Manor. Our next speaker is Dor Liniado. Now, Dor holds an MBA in Business and Information Technology, also graduating with honors, and believes in leveraging innovative solutions to support business targets, and has worked with hundreds of startups in his career. Once again, let's give it up for CISO SC Bank Dor. And a moderator for this very, very special panel started his career as a marine engineer with the Republic of Singapore Navy, and he's also responsible for the overall ICT strategy in OSM Asia. Now, through his varied maritime experience, he's able to align the ICT strategies with organizational strategies and values. On stage right now, in the moderator seat, we have Head of IT, OSM Maritime Ship Management, Joey Chua. And with that, gentlemen, we're going to hand the stage to you. Joey, you can take it away. And please, let's give them your love.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see everybody again, face to face. Not the first physical seminar I have, but always nice to see everybody down here. Before we start, maybe, I like the formal style of introduction, but maybe we have some informal one starting from Stephen.
Yep. Hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to learning and sharing with everybody with regards to cybersecurity. I always believe that we're only as strong as our ecosystem, and it's very important that we learn and share with one another so that we can elevate our ecosystem together. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Sudarsan Lakshmikumar from KeepFlying. I'm a co-founder and CTO of KeepFlying. We are an AI startup in the aviation industry, helping asset owners and MROs projecting their revenue potentials through the remaining useful life of assets. I think coming from a highly controlled industry and also building an AI solution, I think a lot of aspects of cybersecurity has been taken into account, and this is definitely one of the key and challenging areas that we are working on, and would like to share some of the learnings that we had over the course of time, and looking forward to learn a lot from this expert panel as well. Thank you so much.
Great.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Tom. I'm a Sagittarius. I enjoy long walks on the beach and chocolate and movies. I work for a company called SBI Digital Assets, which is ostensibly a blockchain company. Our focus isn't quite cryptocurrency. I've spent a number of years in the blockchain space at IBM and a company called R3, calling out my former colleague Hasheng over there. So I've been on both sides of the fence, both in terms of implementation of pure technology, but now in my current role, the focus of our company is actually bringing digitized capital markets assets to institutional investors and making sure that they're institutional grade. So we're really talking to regulators, banks, capital markets, exchanges, et cetera. So it's an interesting focus between this new technology of blockchain and even cryptocurrency and crypto assets to some extent, and of course traditional finance. And obviously security is extremely paramount, because no doubt you guys have heard of quite a number of hacks in this space, wallets and exchanges being stolen or broken into. So I think that'll be one of the viewpoints that I'll be offering today. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I guess first, great appreciation for everyone that stayed till this hour, so thank you very much. I'm Liniado. I'm working in Standard Chartered for the last 2 years. Previously, I've been in a Commonwealth Bank in Australia, spent in Sydney for 2.5 years, mostly in the various areas in cyber and information security. I've advised and supported probably hundreds of startups. Many of them were acquired, like Adalom, that was be acquired by Microsoft, $300 million, and many others. So really investing myself in innovation and how this can support businesses to achieve their targets. I guess my greatest achievement in personal life is having 3 young daughters in, I think, 7 years that I'm married. So that's probably what makes me busy, similar to the work that I'm doing. In the role that I'm doing, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the consumer, personal, and business banking for Standard Chartered. So it's mainly the retail business and the wealth products that the bank offer globally. And I find it, it's a never boring space. So definitely looking forward to speak with the colleagues here.
Yeah, hi. I'm not sure why I'm here, because all these are experts while I'm the noob here. But it's good that I'm here to learn many things from this gentleman over here. Something funny happened to me a couple of days back. While having some drinks, I received a text. Somebody offering me a job. From this company called A-Star Network.
All right, yeah.
And then obviously, I look at it and I said, okay, somebody is offering me a job. And then they start asking me, do you use TikTok? Do you take part-time job? You can work from home. You just need to give some information to us. And then obviously, A-Star Network doesn't do this kind of stuff, right? And then just nice yesterday, apparently his or her colleague texted me the same thing again. But this time around, of course, I have enough of them. I said that I'm not interested. And they changed their company logo. Yeah, so I mean, in this kind of time and day where we continue to have a lot of digitalization, in Singapore, and then a lot of social media, be it LinkedIn, I met all of them in LinkedIn as well. How are we going to adapt, and what do you feel is the greatest challenge that we face, or in fact, the industry that we face going forward in Singapore? Maybe I can have, let me see who is the best guy to take this first. Dor, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I think that it's inventable, right? I mean, we see it across various industries. Digitalization is a key aspect to improve user experience, to improve profitability. We see it in healthcare industries, in insurance, where eventually, both for the customers and the staff, there is huge projects to improve the user experience and the efficiency. So definitely, we see it as well in financial institution, right? Every bank that I'm familiar with have their digital businesses that trying to drive innovation and try to drive user experience. So I think it's inventable. And I think that while it's definitely because of the nature of moving to digitalization, where you extend your footprint, if it's in the cloud or on-prem, it doesn't really matter, but by nature, it's definitely increased the attack surface, and that brings opportunities for attackers that maybe they haven't had before. However, I find actually, while it's definitely increased the attack surface, I think that companies have the opportunities to improve their security posture as they move in from legacy solution that they have in the past, or they actually following the foundation that they need to follow and implement security by design. So, you know, I definitely see cloud as an enabler for security if you're doing it right. You know, I'm just thinking about companies like Microsoft and AWS, and it's quite hard to compete with their security and the investment that they put into security. So I think that eventually, while definitely there are challenges moving towards the digitalization, if companies doing it in the right balance, leveraging cloud, leveraging cyber innovation, keep the basics and foundations, that's definitely something, the threat can be mitigated by following these principles.
Thank you, Dol. Maybe I have Stephen, your input as well.
Yep, sure. I fully agree with on what he has shared. Digital transformation is inevitable. As a business, I mean, from an ISAC perspective, we look very much at risk governance. And what it meant is that we have to focus on realizing business benefits, maximizing business benefits while optimizing risk and resources. And we all know for a fact that there's no 100% security. So we must, as an enterprise, identify where our appetite is and our tolerance levels are, right? And then work towards that. The best way to stay fully secure is not to do any business at all. I mean, that's the fact of life, right? So identifying that goalpost is important. And from there on, looked at performing that risk assessment, threat modeling, looking at our business impact and assessment, focusing on what are the areas that you feel are most important to you, whether it's the availability or the integrity of the data or the confidentiality of the data, or even safety, because when you talk about operational technology, in a lot of critical infrastructure, safety becomes paramount. And then I think I like what you have mentioned about security by design, and I would also like to add resilient by design, simply because there is no 100% security. We need to not just look at shifting left, but also look at the right part of the equation. For those of you who are familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework, there's the identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The detect, respond, and recover piece has become very important increasingly over the years as the attack surface has increased and breaches are happening everywhere. The big names have been breached. Microsoft itself has been breached. Cisco has been breached before. Look at SolarWinds. Look at the supply chain attacks that have happened in recent times. You look at Log4j attacks and so forth. So it is important for us to also look at the right piece, the right part of the NIST framework, identifying the right intelligence, being able to detect fast, contain fast, and recover fast, which brings me to the fact that your business continuity planning becomes very important. Your tabletop exercises becomes very important. You need to extend it to the supply chain. And the supply chain is not just your consumers, your suppliers, but also your hardware and software suppliers. And in the area of cloud, you need to work this out with your cloud service providers, involve them in your tabletop exercises. What happens when there's a breach in the cloud? Yeah, and questions like not just whether they comply with SOC 2, but whether they notify you when there is a breach, so that you can make well-informed decisions. Do you want to execute a draw breach immediately? Do they give you enough information to make that well-informed decision? And if there are zero-day vulnerabilities, do they inform you soon enough, even when there is no patch? Do they advise you on your mitigating measures? So in the series of supply chain attacks that have happened in recent years, there was one that stands out. That specific software vendor, even though there's a zero-day vulnerability, they did not share about it until they have the patch ready. By then, it was already too late. Those telcos that have used their products were already compromised. One of our biggest telcos in Singapore was compromised as a result, and consumer data was leaked as a result. So all this due diligence, extending this to the due diligence and governance to the suppliers becomes very important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Maybe I would like to hear from Tom as well, because he works with obviously financial institutes like yourself in Standard Chartered. What do you think about it?
Yeah, the gentlemen to the left and right of me have made some really excellent points. To add to that, again, in the digital asset space, and under that I would include cryptocurrency and everything that's happening in DeFi and so forth, obviously has a big target on its back. It's one thing to try and hack into a bank system, a core banking system, and try and withdraw money or something like that, or break into an ATM. But it's another thing to take something that's only a digital representation of money, or something that has an asset that has some value, and actually siphon that off. And actually, as it turns out, that's a lot easier to do, as we've heard in the news and so forth. So what keeps me up at night, besides my neighbors next door, is the fact that we have a target, particularly people in the financial industry that are digitizing assets and digitizing money, have a really big target on us, particularly not just from thieves and so forth, but actually from states. And Joey, it was funny that you mentioned that example of in essence, the fake job recruiting, because one of the companies in our group, in the SBI group, was hacked that way through LinkedIn, through phishing attempt of a job. And as it turned out, we did forensic analysis of it, and it turned out traced it back to North Korea, which kind of sounds like a joke, but in essence, they're really going after digital assets. And then there was another example of a very, very sophisticated phishing attack, which was discussed in the crypto news and so forth, where basically they set up a fake website, and they stole the names and identities of some researchers in this space, and then basically posed as them and spent months setting this up and trying to lure in victims. So the sophistication of the attacks is getting much greater. And to Dora's point about the number of attack vectors, that's really what'll worry me. So on the one hand, I have to worry about social media. I can tell you, for example, I get friend requests from all these really attractive Chinese women who the first thing they ask me is about what's my favorite cryptocurrency, and then we're off and running, hey, can you share your wallet address and things like that. So that's the social media attack. Obviously, those of us who think about encryption and encrypted wallets and things like that, now you worry about quantum computing and the effect that attacks using quantum computers will have, where you'll be able to essentially decrypt today's keys. Now, I saw the NIST recently came out with some quantum keys, so hopefully the technology stays one step ahead. But nevertheless, those of us on stage have to think about these sorts of things and about all the different attack vectors, including, by the way, internally into our organizations. It's been shown that a lot of attacks come internally. So it's really all these different ways you have to think about it, and then ideally maybe you have a really good security team, or you hire consultants that actually test out your defenses.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to hear many of them speak of things. I'm taking my homework. I'm sure you guys are doing the same, because we are learning quite a fair bit from them. From improving legacy infrastructure that it can help us, by moving to cloud, with stable providers, Microsoft, AWS, to risk governance, and then to threat modeling, and then obviously, and look at the various attack factors, which includes the internal people that you have in your organization as well. I think these are all important things to take note. So my second question is actually to Sudarsan.
Yep.
I had a read in about KeepFlying. Pardon me, I'm not well written, so I have not read about all these things until obviously we introduced. And it's quite interesting that what you are doing, in your organization. But when you think about such things, because it involves a lot of data, big data, complex, unstructured, structured, how do you think, you will be able to incorporate, privacy by design in whatever you're providing to the other organization that you are selling your product to?
Yeah, thank you, Joey. That's a very relevant question for us. Based on our experience and a number of discussions that I've had with various IT leaders around the world who deal with big data projects, I can say that going by privacy by design approach is pretty crucial and critical. At KeepFlying, as I mentioned earlier, so we have built an AI-driven solution for asset owners in the aviation industries, such as airlines, lessors, engine lessors, or aircraft lessors, so banks, financiers, and others. And we would be dealing with gigabytes or even terabytes of data from each of these customers on a daily basis. So based on our experience, I can firmly say that anyone who's dealing with large volumes of data should take this privacy or security by design approach quite seriously. This has been there for years. It's not something new. I think it's been there since early 1990s, if I'm not wrong, originally proposed by Dr. Anne Kawikian from Ontario, Canada. So what we essentially do here is to embed privacy techniques and measures into our solution or service that we offer right from the beginning, or at least during the early stages of design and development. By techniques, I mean all the tongue-twisting, data masking techniques like anonymization, pseudonymization. You go with privacy techniques like homomorphic encryption, differential privacy, federated learning, which is quite important for us, transfer learning, things like that. I'm not going to get into details of these individual techniques, but what we did was we were able to incorporate all these techniques as part of our core architecture and early design, which enabled our solution to have that strong privacy posture. And we were also able to sell the solution to our customers with utmost trust and confidence with respect to privacy. I'll just take another minute just to quickly summarize some of the foundational principles to go with this approach. One, of course, it's one of the most proactive approaches. It's preventative in nature, wherein you prevent any invasive attacks or breaches, rather than taking a remedial approach, wherein you wait until something happens and respond with remedies. And two, as I mentioned earlier, privacy becomes an integral part of your core functionality, and it's tightly coupled with your architecture, so you don't have to make a lot of changes later on. And it also ensures privacy through the entire data lifecycle or the data pipeline, having all the required data governance principles and security measures being implemented end-to-end. And again, by default, privacy is by default here, which means your data is automatically protected and private as well. Most importantly, a lot of these regulatory authorities are pushing companies to go with privacy by design or security by design, so that they comply with all the local privacy regulations, such as GDPR, PDPA here in Singapore, CCPA, ADGM, so on and so forth. And we also have industry-specific standards. This itself is becoming really challenging because we have so many standards and regulations to comply with. But having this approach incorporated as part of your solution would make our lives a lot easier in the end, because the changes that we need to make to comply with these regulations would be a lot less, would be minimal, and hence would be saving a lot of time, efforts and money in the end. So that's pretty important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Though I heard you mention that you have helped various startups in the past. You know, I'm obviously very curious because certain startups are, you could say they are small in size in general. And then in order to roll out, market products, features that the people need, but at the same time, you need to, incorporate all these things in their solution. So what's your advice to them?
So first of all, it's music to my ears that you're not selling security by part of your business, but you implement all of these things by design. From my experience, if you look 10 years ago, even for cybersecurity startup, we were engaging with them. We were talking about, okay, do you encrypt the database that we keep all of the data? They were looking at you and say, what do you mean? Why do we need to do that? So I think that the world has changed dramatically. It comes with some of the things that you mentioned. There is regulatory now that even, eventually they need to sell their product. Yeah. They want to sell it to finance institution. There is no way that the finance institution will not check that all of these controls are in place. So I think that the industry changed a lot. And again, I was always, 10 years ago when I was looking and I was saying, it's unbelievable that I'm talking with security folks that do not have in some aspects security basics in their solution. But I think a lot of things changed since then. And because of regulatory, because of the maturity that organizations are at, it's quite challenging for startups on the one hand to sell their product without implementing it by design. So I think that what I see more and more, first of all, many startups, when they start in very early stages, they form advisory boards from security expertise. I'm a member today of one of the startups here in Singapore that dealing with quantifying risk and supporting businesses and organization in risk. But I see more and more the understanding that in order to build it right, in order to be able to sell it, the expertise are brought right at the start. So I mean, it's changed a lot, and I think that it's part of the design. One last thing about cloud and privacy. I'm thinking about 365, like Microsoft 365. When I first embedded it in ECI Telecom, probably 7 or 8 years ago, we talked about compliance or regulatory. They came up with a solution that was quite innovative, that was called Lockbox, which I think it's a feature that they have until now, that they understood that back then that if they want the organization will keep leveraging their solution, they must give them some comfort. Because eventually, when you move to 365, you don't see the underlying infrastructure. You're not dealing with that. You have no idea what happened. So what they did, they launched a solution that called Lockbox. I think it was even free, that eventually allowed you as an organization to tell them, okay, turn it on, and then only when they wanted backend or administrator, a database administrator wanted to reach out to your database or to do some maintenance work, they had first to reach out to you and get approval. So they had the mindset even 7 years ago that they could not sell their product, as we call it, without embedding security by design, without giving you the tools to control and be compliant as on the on-prem solution. So yeah, it's definitely a different world comparing to where we were 10 years ago, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice to hear that actually, I always believe that, there's never IT projects, it's always business project, there's IT, driven initiatives. So it actually boils down to the same thing, right? Like you said, it's the selling point now, right? Cybersecurity embedded in privacy by design, embedded in your solution is a selling point to your customers, and also a differentiator from your competitors as well. I think it's quite nice that we continue to have a lot of very good discussion over here. But before I continue, because I have another 2,000 questions down here, is there anybody who have some burning questions? Maybe the panelists can actually help to answer it. okay, I guess it's the time of the day where, you know, people just want to, it's between us and the beer, right? Okay. Just now we talked about, you know, privacy by design, you know, security, and obviously, you know, it ties down to data protection, information security that we mentioned earlier. What do you recommend, or how do you think that, you know, we can actually measure and demonstrate such compliance, you know, to folks like me who have no clue, you know? Maybe I can have, let me see, Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. We're actually a regulated financial institution. So SBI Digital Markets, we have applied for our capital markets license from MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, which will allow us to operate as a capital markets entity. As a result, and DOR is obviously well aware of this being at Standard Chartered, MAS has very rigorous standards by which they expect any financial institution or any licensed financial institution to abide by. And that ranges, and the way that they describe it, there's actually a 70-some-odd page guidebook, which is what they call the Technical Risk Management Guide. So the focus is on risk mitigation, and it's all about you putting in policies and procedures in such a way that you're mitigating the security risk, because it's primarily almost exclusively security risk, as a financial institution. And oh, by the way, we MAS get to come in and audit you at any given time. And if we find that you fall short and you don't have prescriptive measures in place for how you're going to address this, that's a problem. That's going to be an issue. So on the one hand, it's great to have that helpful guidance, as it were. On the other hand, I'm going to spend an enormous amount of time, effort, and costs to try and meet that, those guidelines. And we were discussing a little bit about that before the panel, about compliance and about regulatory aspects to that and the costs of it and so forth. And it's true that Singapore probably is a little bit more stringent, a little bit more rigorous than other institutions. Nevertheless, I think it's probably the case that others are catching up to Singapore. Singapore is kind of a leader in this, which, again, as a financial institution who has to comply, I both like this and really despise it, because it's going to cost me a great deal of effort. But I think that it actually shows or points to one of the very key points, and that is security is extremely expensive. There's no way around it, whether it's the hardware, whether it's the software, whether it's the consulting and services, the amount of time and effort that you spend on it. However, the flip side to that, of course, is a breach is arguably even more expensive. And for example, within SBI, I'm mandated to use some of SBI resources, such as a cloud layer that they provision on top of AWS. And they charge me, they do a chargeback to me that's actually fairly expensive. But the argument for doing that is that they feel that they're mitigating the risk to the SBI corporation, to the SBI group. So it's not even necessarily financial. This has nothing to do with MAS. This is more about the mitigating reputational risk, never mind financial risk, never mind any other kinds of risk. So, so that's going to cost me money to pay for the cloud in addition to paying AWS. On the other hand, again, my corporate masters say this will mitigate the risk to us from a reputational standpoint. And then I have to worry about satisfying MAS around financial risk primarily, or customer risk and personal identification information, things like that. So there's just no way around the fact that this stuff is expensive, but the cost of not doing it arguably is much more expensive.
Okay, maybe Sudarsan, maybe you want to follow up with that as well?
Yes, I think he covered most of the points. You know, I would like to just keep it simple, as you know, gentlemen, both of my sides mentioned. You know, we need to have that risk assessment done. You know, have you know, threat modeling, and probably have tools in place that would, you know, monitor various security measures that we have implemented, and also, if possible, have an automated response system in place. So in case of any breach or any attempt for a breach or attack, anyone in the company who's responsible of this would be demoted, and will be taking any remedial steps that we need to take. As Tom mentioned, this is an expensive process, but if breach happens, it's going to be even more expensive. So it's good to be proactive and have that budget and investment upfront rather than waiting until something happens and pay a hefty fine, or even to fix these incidents, it'll be a lot more expensive.
Thank you. Stephen, you actually wear a lot of hats. I noticed yeah, with OT-ISAC, and then after that you are with ISAC Singapore chapter, and then you have obviously your day job as well. What do you think about say again?
Just helping out with the ecosystem, yeah.
Yeah. So since you have quite a fair bit of view in general in almost a majority of the industry because of where you are sitting or what you are doing, volunteering, like you mentioned. So what do you think about this as well?
Yeah, I fully concur with what Tom and Sudarsan has shared earlier. I think as supply chain attacks happen, digital trust becomes very important. How do we have customers and the upstream and downstream trust their supply chain? So in fact, ISAC came out with a digital trust ecosystem paper. How do you establish that digital trust? And locally in Singapore, just adding on to what has been shared, I fully concurred, getting that compliance certifications done. PDPA, the PDPC, right, the Commission for Personal Data Privacy, they have come out with a digital privacy protection trust mark, DPTM, where you can undergo a compliance and then have that trust mark being labeled on the website. So that gives an additional confidence. And even CSA, I think Safer Cyber pillar, they have also came out with cyber trust marks, right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect I would like to highlight is also that assumed breach approach. Yes, we talk about secure by design, zero trust, where you focus on like MFA for O365, and roles and responsibilities, making sure that the shared responsibility model is adhered to, that we are not just relying on the vendors themselves, that we don't end up with misconfigured cloud buckets and so forth. The other aspect of it is really how do we handle incidents and instill confidence that we are handling it correct. Are we transparent with our customers, or are we hiding and trying to muffle the incident and not giving that assurance to the consumer? So I think that part of having that proper playbook, establishing trust even after an incident is very important. Yeah.
I think it's quite nice to hear this. I'm in the shipping industry, and they have a saying, safety is expensive, try an accident. Yeah, so this is what we, because obviously in a maritime aspect where you have an accident at sea, let's say for example, if you have an oil spillage in Australia, right, you probably can say bye-bye to your company. You'll be sued by basically the whole Australian population, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Sorry, if I may just chime in, it's interesting that you mentioned it, because in my day job, I work in PSA. So, I mean, a century and 2 years back, right, when Titanic sank, a lot of things changed. So they established more timely drills, they established better communications, so this, we can actually learn from these lessons. They still resonate even in the cyberspace as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Considering time, let me probably ask one more question. If there's last chance, anybody? Question?
Yeah. Good evening. I have a question to the panel about recent OCBC incident where thousands of users been scammed overnight. So who is it OCBC as a institute failed to provide data security, or they could have done better on that, or is the user who should be more, vigilance while they just follow the instructions? So, as an expert panel, what do you advise? What you will say on this? That really OCBC have not done what they could have done better way to handle the data of the consumers.
I can try to take
Yes?
So I think it's very, I mean, it won't be fair to say that it's OCBC failure. We've seen it across the world, this type of phishing and scamming attack on day to day. I think it's definitely a challenging, and I think that MAS was very clear, at least what they expect to see. So as an example, MAS issued lately new requirement for banks. So if there is a customer that suspect that they under some malicious activity, they will just push the button and they will shut down their account from any activities. That is expected now for banks to issue in Singapore, this type of feature for customers. But going back to the OCBC incident, and considering that I'm working for Standard Chartered and I'm in this business, protecting retail customers, I would say that, attackers are becoming more, I would say, becoming smarter, right? We implement, MFA, they always trying to find ways to bypass it. We implement, biometric capabilities to really recognize you as a customer, and they are finding a way to try to, sometimes they're bypassing it. So I think that definitely always there in any type of incident similar to it, there is always the question what we can do better and how we can protect the customer. I think there is also a great deal to educate customers as much as possible, and it's not always easy because there is always the old population that are not that they do not understand always the aspect. So I think I think that definitely always the industry need to think what we can do better to protect our customers and what the strategy to do so. And I think that the regulator always push us to consider that. And as I mentioned, MAS said, you need to stop implement links in any communication to the customers. You need to provide this type of feature to the customer to ensure that they can shut down their account if they're under malicious activity. So I think it's definitely evolving a battle that we will always see this type of events and incident, and there will always be new things that the regulator or the industry would try to implement to protect the customers. I hope that it answered.
And just one thing to add to that, there's a trade-off between convenience and that risk, right? So for the retail customer, we could probably set the bar fairly high for them to withdraw money. For example, you can only go to a teller and provide biometric information or something like that. But nobody really wants that. I want to be able to do online banking. I want to be able to go to an ATM, what have you. So the more that you slide in the direction of convenience, the more risk you're bound to introduce. That's just a given. So Dor and folks like him will have that balancing act between the convenience that you want to afford customers and the risk that that introduces. But that just comes with the territory.
And that is one of the key challenges that we face, finding the right balance.
Yeah, in fact, I really fully agree with what has been mentioned. It's like driving a car to work, right? So we are taking risks when we drive cars to work, but over time we matured. Putting on the seatbelt, everything becomes second nature. So similarly for cybersecurity, it requires a whole of ecosystem. I think the governments, working with regulators, are working with non-profit associations to level up people, process, and technology across such threats. And if you want to hear from the man himself, just a short plug over here. ISAC, we are actually running our annual conference on the 15th of September. And we have Thomas Cock, who oversees risk in OCBC, as one of our presenters. And you can raise questions to him during that panel session.
I think that seminar will be very popular after you announce this. Okay, we are a little bit short of time, so I think, is there any more other questions that the floor would like to ask? Yep, we have a lady over there.
Hi, I'm Swastika. Maybe a silly one, but following his question, so how do we decide how much to secure? I mean, while security is very important, how do we understand we are not over-securing because security is not free?
Yep. Maybe I can start first. I shared in the beginning that ultimately cybersecurity is about enabling the business and differentiating the business. So as part of good governance, it's about maximizing business benefits while optimizing risks and resources. So in the ISAC doctrine, in the COVID doctrine itself, in the COVID framework, we focus a lot on optimizing risk and not reducing risk to a minimum, because there's no minimum. There is no 100% security. We need to first identify, have visibility into where our risk appetite is, right? So that really involves understanding what assets we have, what are the enterprise risks, what are the important risk areas that we are concerned with our business, is it reputation, is it, and so forth. Perform that business impact analysis, threat modeling, and determining how much we want to spend in securing, right? So there is no 100%. Like I shared earlier, the surest way is to really not to do any business, right? Yeah, but to have a business going, we really need to take some risk, yeah, and not overspend on it, right? Don't spend $1 million to secure a $1,000 asset. That simply doesn't make sense. Yeah, that's my take. Yeah.
Just to add, I think that your question was probably, it's interesting question, and the answer to it was probably different if you would ask this question 5 or 10 years ago to today. 5, 10 years ago, the question was an answer that the CISO should provide an answer to. While today, I think that the accountability should be shifted and shifting to the business to answer about how much is security cost eventually. I think that today, definitely, from the less organizations that I've been working in, definitely see that the business taking decision with eyes open about security and the appetite that they need to accept. And while these things are clear to them, then they answer about how much they want to invest and how much, what their appetite. I think if the information cybersecurity is well embedded in the business, eventually it becomes a business questions of how much they want to spend. And that's what we should drive, because again, ICS is not living by itself. It cannot be isolated from the business objectives and targets. Now again, if you would ask this question probably 5, 10 years ago, that was an answer that the CISO would give you and tell you, this is what it is. I think we definitely, at least from what I see, we're shifting it to ensure, shifting it to the business to make these decisions about their appetite as you described.
And it's also worth noting that in that cost-benefit analysis, if you look at an example like credit card companies, if somebody commits credit card fraud, somebody steals my number and orders something on Amazon, while Visa may refund that money to me, Visa typically will not go after the person who committed the fraud because financially it doesn't make sense for them to do so. The amount of trouble, the amount of effort it would take, it's not worth it. So they write off quite a bit of fraud because that's their financial model. They just build that into their financial model. Now, however, if it's a credit card fraud ring and they're doing micro fraudulent transactions, but it adds up to millions and millions of dollars, then maybe they'll go after that ring. But again, this is where Visa has a cost-benefit analysis of what they're willing to spend on security to chase fraud.
Okay, they tell me time is up, but then I have one last question because I need to know from all these experts, granted there's no silver bullet in cybersecurity, there's no one thing that solves everything. What do you want to see more in this space in cybersecurity? Maybe I'll start with Stephen.
All All right, just a quick one. When I spoke to some of the SMEs, when I volunteered to provide vCISO services to them, one thing that stands out is a lot of them didn't have their risk appetite identified, right? So they don't have the enterprise risk pillars identified and aligned between business risk to their IT risk. That alignment is really very important because that really tells you how much you should invest and put in place, yeah, to meet the appetite and tolerance level. And like what Law has rightfully put it, that roles and responsibilities, the accountability at the topmost level is very important. Having that business owner who holds the purse strings to be able to decide how much risk that needs to be taken is of utmost importance. And to have that risk communication communicated to all levels, to all employees. So all employees, security is everybody's responsibility. They know exactly the part that they play in this whole ecosystem. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep, I would like to bring in the people into the equation here. Nowadays, hardly a day goes by, without reading news articles about, various attacks happening around the world and the impending, what we call cyber apocalypse. These are the strong, scary words that we use in general. And I would like to, spin a positive tone to all these things. I would like to quote Stefan Nappo, who's one of, popular global CISO, and he's won the awards. What he has said is, having a security culture, would achieve much more than a prohibition posture. So that was his statement, which means, we can achieve much more by avoiding constant pitching of negative and fear-mongering narratives to the people, or rather focus on training people to be more vigilant and training them to follow all the best practices around the security measures and the data governance principles and things. And we would be able to build a more productive and secure environment by empowering employees, security leaders, business leaders, to have informed risk decisions and to have a distributed responsibility over security measures. So,
okay, that's good. Thank you. And
Right.
Tom?
So just very quickly piggybacking onto those statements, and it's fairly obvious, but just basically the continuing improvement of tools, standards, organizations, anything that gets security information and best practices out there. So yeah, again, because these are expensive propositions, anything that kind of will help lessen that cost, make it easier for us to do this and do an assessment. So for example, to have, let's say, AI-driven tools for doing network penetration of my networks, or doing threat assessments based on input and things like that. I know there's already consulting firms out there that do a lot of this, and they're great, but it would be nice to have this in our hands to some extent.
For me, 2 points. One of them I was thinking while the guys were speaking here. I don't think that anyone doing well risk quantification. I mean, from like understanding exactly how much money would you invest in that type of risk or the other. I mean, there are different framework and solutions, but it's still evolving. And I think that the nature of cyber risk that exists, I don't know, like really in 10, 20 years in reality, comparing to credit risk, it's almost impossible to, to get to the same maturity. So I think definitely risk quantification and understanding the dollar value that you need to invest, continuing the question that the lady was asking here would be helpful, but I think it will take time. And the second thing that I think the entire industry is struggling is with cyber skill and the shortage of human that can support it. So I think that, countries, organizations need to invest more to educate the next generation, because definitely, I've been in different continents and everyone's struggling with skills and getting the right people to this job. So that's the two things I think would be interesting to see evolving.
Okay, thank you very much for listening to us. I'm sure you're going to put your money in Standard Chartered after this. OCBC is not here, so we can't speak for them. But thanks a lot for listening to us, and thank you for the distinguished panelists to share their insights with us as well today. Thank you very much. Before I go, obviously, I think I missed out on the important thing earlier.
The selfie?
Yes.
Yeah, you gotta do that selfie. All right.
So we got everybody here.
And by the way, if you do take any selfies today and if you upload it on LinkedIn with the hashtag Exito DTS Singapore and tag Exito, you might win an Apple Watch as well. It might be you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give all 5 gentlemen a nice big round of applause. Before